So finally, the thing for me would be us using Bryson to review our performance. And this for me, I think, is something that I'm going to be, again, really pushing to do. And it's something you can do through a coach or through someone you trust, or just to yourself. But please make sure this is happening. Okay, so as we take Braslav for an example, what I would tend to want to see would be to look at the last 3 rounds. So that would be the Braslav tournament, 2 or 3 rounds, and get those up in the statistics, okay? And compare to the last maybe 10 rounds or your last season, and then identify the key scoring areas, okay? Ask yourself the hard questions. And I think being honest and open and your own biggest critic is important, providing you're staying positive about this. Okay, so what was good? What could be improved? So I've got an example here from one of the players. And again, I'm not going to name the name of this player, but for me, these are the key stats that we want. And they're on that headline page of Bryson because we know these are the key areas for scoring. So on the right-hand side there, I've got the baseline target numbers. But if we look through this player, we've got the greens in regulation and the greens in regulation per round. So this guy or girl was hitting over 14 greens in regulation, which is excellent, which is really, really good because we know that we're looking for 13. And then out of those greens in regulation, he was hitting nearly 70% of those within 6 meters of the hole, which is an unbelievable stat. So for me, this says right away that what is happening from tee to green is fantastic, okay? And this is the same person that did moan to me about how they were driving the golf ball. Okay, so I don't care how you're driving the golf ball if you're hitting 14 greens in regulation, nearly 70% of those were within 6 meters. The driving is not an issue that's correlating to your scoring. So the 2 things for me that just looking at that I identified was, right, well, how many of those putts inside 6 meters were converted? Only 24%. So that's probably half of what we want to see if we are going to be shooting decent scores, if we're going to be shooting under par. And then in terms of the scrambling, again, 27%, and we're looking for that 50%. So immediately, just looking at those headline figures, we can see there what areas have cost better scores and what areas have contributed significantly. Okay, so for me, absolutely, we need to be looking there at the putting and the scrambling. And then as I go deeper into that, okay, so we know there that actually nearly all of those chip shots, those shots around the green, were from the rough. So are we doing enough with our short game practice from those rough lies rather than the fairway? Okay. And then looking at the putting, we can see actually, well, there's 9 3-putts there, knowing that we're after a target of less than 1 per round. And I can start to dive deeper into those areas. But the important thing for me is absolutely using those 5 parameters that we've got on the screen to start identifying where that score is cost, and not just leaving it up to how we feel. And that comes a bit back to accepting that we don't always strike the ball perfectly, but we can be in good positions to then have good approaches. But those numbers on the screen there are going to be the ones that are directly correlating to how we score. So use those numbers. So filter the last 3 rounds, identify the scoring areas, and ask yourself the hard questions. So my questions now would be, okay, what was it in the putting that made you have 9 3-putts? Was it the speed of the greens? that you just couldn't get used to? Is there something you can do now in your practice before you go out to compete to calibrate that speed? Is it that when we were inside that 3 to 6 meters and there's a very low percentage there, were we not giving the hole a chance? Was it a read? Was it speed? Was it start line? But actually starting to dive down into those numbers a little bit more. But don't get lost in all of the stats. This is simple stuff. These are the key things that we need to look at, and don't forget that. And go to those first, compare it to our baseline and say, right, what have we done this week? Now, the putting, for instance, could just be the greens were just not good enough and you're happy with the stroke, and that is fine as well. But you need to be reflective based on those numbers. So to finish off, guys, I think this is a task that I'm saying is a task for now, but actually should be a task for every time you finish a tournament, every time you come off a golf course. Okay, so how many greens, in positions, conversions and scrambles did you make? Because that is going to identify where the shots were lost. And then being honest with yourself, what was great about your performance in these areas? Because there's always going to be good things, and we can make the stats look how we want, but actually we need to be realistic, but also positive about what's been good. And then what are the biggest areas that will improve scoring next time out? So we know for this player, it's going to be around the green, increasing the up and downs and the conversion of putts. So then telling yourself, right, what am I going to do to develop these areas? Is it going to be in the technical, the tactical, so the decision making, the strategy, or the mental side? And then be specific with that. Give yourself some measurable drills. Who can you turn to for support? And that could be us as coaches within the federation, your personal coaches, but use someone, show them what you've put down for the above information, and then use that to help shape your practice and keep your development plan updated. And I think if you can start getting into that reflective cycle there, you're going to identify quickly, you're going to be more specific with your practice, and you're going to make improvement faster. Okay.